February 10th, 2000. February 10th, 2000. That day will go down in Reds history, and will go down in Major League history when one of the biggest trades in the history of our sport took place, when the Michael Jordan of baseball came home to Cincinnati. The player of the decade, an all-century player, a player that was born in Cincinnati, has become one of the best players in our sport, has come home.
Jim talked about this date being a landmark date for the Cincinnati Reds. I think to a certain extent it's a landmark date for the game of baseball. I think this signing shows a return to a certain fiscal responsibility and economic event that I think is important to the game of baseball. Obviously, it was important to the Cincinnati Reds as we tried to get accomplished what we did.
Well, I'm finally home.
Where were you that night? Where were you when baseball's best player came home? Me? I'll get to that in a minute. It's hard to imagine now. The game is nowhere near the same as it was in 2000. The salaries, the players, the rules, large market, larger market, small market, smaller market, rebuilds, state-of-the-art stadiums. But 25 years ago, something incredible happened. Something that most likely will never happen again. A superstar, one of the game's greatest, came back to his hometown on a hometown discount to play ball where he did as a kid, where his dad did for the Big Red Machine. It's like Shohei Ohtani being from Cincinnati and deciding to accept a trade to play here. It was incredible. I'm Cam Miller, and this is Junior Comes Home, a look back 25 years ago to when Ken Griffey Jr. returned to the Queen City. In 2000, you got your rumors from four places: the usual TV, talk radio, and newspapers. But the new kid on the block was the internet. Forums, chat groups. There were rumors spreading like wildfire. Hearing reports and sources are saying there was a chance that Junior would become a Red. I wanted to believe it, but I was skeptical. On February 10th, I was in my car, or to be more specific, my Ford Aerostar minivan. I was in the back parking lot of the Boys and Girls Club, where I was the program director, and I was just getting ready to leave when I turned on WLW. They were saying that they were going to go live to Synergy Field for a press conference. I thought. I turned it up.
The Cincinnati Reds officially announce that we have acquired Ken Griffey Jr. from the Seattle Mariners in exchange for the contracts of pitcher Brett Tomko, outfielder Mike Cameron, and two minor league players, Antonio Perez and Jake Meyer. We would not have made this trade if we did not have the ability to sign Mr. Griffey to a long-term contract, because we didn't want him for just 1 year to rent a player. We didn't want a Greg Vaughn, a Ron Gant, a Kevin Mitchell. We wanted a permanent superstar in Cincinnati to open our new stadium. And we accomplished that.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I clapped my hands, I yelled something in between a wahoo and a hell yes, and I raced home to tell my kids. Opening day couldn't come fast enough. Now, a program director for a United Way-funded job doesn't make season ticket money, so that was out of the question. Although I was tempted to grab my Nokia mobile phone and order tickets for opening day, or at least try to, but I didn't. I did the next best thing. We went to the mall that weekend and bought all the Junior t-shirts we could find and a poster to hang above my kids' bunk beds. How did we get here? Well, it almost happened, and then it almost didn't. Perhaps the best timeline of what happened in that incredible late 1999, early 2000 story was Tom Verducci of Sports Illustrated, who wrote a fantastic cover story. This is November 1999, just a month after the Reds lost that one-game playoff to the Mets. Quote, in November, Mariners GM Gillick and Mariners CEO Howard Lincoln flew to Orlando to meet with Griffey. He wanted out. He told Gillick and Lincoln he preferred to be traded rather than play the last season of his contract in Seattle. As a player with 10 years of Major League service, including at least the past 5 years with his current team, Griffey had the right to veto any trade. He gave the Mariners a list of 4 teams he would consider playing for. He listed them in order of preference: Braves, Reds, Astros, and New York Mets. End quote. So over the next few months, the Astros and Braves faded out of the discussion, and that left the Mets and Reds, ironically. Back to the article, November 19th, 1999. Quote, that left the Reds and the Mets. Talks with Cincinnati got off to an awful start at the general managers meeting on November 19th. Sitting in an ocean view suite at the Ritz-Carlton in Laguna Niguel, California, Gillick made his first offer to Bowden. Griffey for 4 frontline players: second baseman Pokey Reese, first baseman Sean Casey, left-handed starter Denny Nagel, and right-handed closer Scott Williamson, and 1 player from a list of the 5 best prospects in the Cincinnati system. Bowden nearly fell out of his chair. His club had won 96 games last season. All his plans were aimed at building a winning team in 2003, when the Reds are scheduled to open a new ballpark. A deal like this would decimate the team and the plans. Before leaving the room, he recovered enough to tell Gillick firmly, Casey and Reese are not going to be in this deal. End quote. Now, let's go to December 1999, and the first true public affirmation that the Reds were in talks. This is when the chat room started really heating up. The Junior trade idea came from Bowden, who said he was going to bring Junior home. But Reds executives squelched that idea the next day. There was just no way they could afford it. 2 days later, as the winter meetings were in full swing, Bowden went to Gillick's suite and began talking again. After Gillick requested Reese to be a part of the trade, Bowden jumped up, stormed out, and had a press conference saying that the Mariners were asking way too much and the talks were over.
The Reds today have pulled out, will no longer pursue a trade for Ken Griffey Jr. Neither side has moved in 5 weeks. It's a waste of time to continue to have discussions and meetings when we get absolutely nowhere.
Now it's January 2000, and the Mets are out of the picture. Back to Tom Verducci's article. Quote, on January 30th, after 2 more days of no movement, Bowden presented this idea to Gillick. Forget about the issues of the 2000 salary and the long-term contract. Let's just see if we can make a baseball trade, and we'll let Chuck Armstrong of the Mariners and John Allen of the Reds negotiate the dollars. On February 5th, 2000, Mariners executives called Bowden with a new proposal, this one without Reese. Seattle wanted Perez, Reyes, Tomko, and catcher Jason LaRue, one of the 11 players on Bowden's secret list and the only top young catcher in Bowden's system. Bowden couldn't part with LaRue. Perez was also on the list of 11, but with Reese, veteran shortstop Barry Larkin, and shortstop prospect Travis Dawkins in the organization, Bowden felt deep enough in the middle infield to make him expendable. But on February 8th, with rumors that the Reds were going to call off talks, for real this time, the Mariners, who had to make a deal, were desperate. And with Junior willing to take a hometown discount, everything changed. This is from February 9th, 2000 at 4 p.m. Tom Verducci's article. Quote, executives from the 2 clubs alternately argued and caucused for the next hour. The Mariners gave in. They asked for Cameron instead of Reese. Bowden coyly refused. He offered to get outfielder Jim Edmonds from the Anaheim Angels and pass him on to the Mariners. Gillick didn't want Edmonds, who could be a free agent at the end of the season and who, the Mariners already knew, would not sign a long-term deal with them. Bowden came back with another offer, Tomko and Cameron for Griffey. Gillick insisted on Reyes and Perez as well. You're not getting Reyes and Perez, Bowden explained. No way. We don't want to do it, but we'll put Perez in. That's it. No more. And this deal is off the table tomorrow. Let's make it or not right now. Said Gillick, are you going to let Dennis Reyes keep you from trading for Ken Griffey? And are you willing to live with that for the rest of your life? Bowden shot back. Are you willing to lose Ken Griffey for nothing and live with that for the rest of your life? End quote. So now it's February 9th. Now this is Jim Bowden receiving a phone call. The article from Tom Verducci says, quote, his telephone rang at 8:21 p.m. One of the lower-level Mariners executives said they had to have a 4th player. What about Meyer, a relief pitcher for the Reds that they had left unprotected in December? That was it. The deal was done. Beginning at 9 p.m., and only now, with the proper blessing of Major League Baseball, the Reds had 72 hours to work out a deal with Griffey and Goldberg, Griffey's agent. I don't want to be an albatross around anybody's neck, Griffey told Goldberg. I don't want to take up such a huge part of somebody's payroll that they can't do other things. They should still have money to get a player at the trading deadline if they need one. Griffey is guaranteed $116.5 million over the next 9 years, with the Reds holding an option for a 10th season, although Griffey's salary will be $12.5 million a year, plus a $4 million buyout for the 10th year. The deal is worth only about $89 million in present-day dollars, because Griffey agreed to defer $57.5 million of that total at 4% interest. Those payments are stretched between 2010 and 2025, when Griffey will be 56 years old. Griffey agreed to those terms one day after the Mariners finally blinked, allowing 4 months of talking and posturing about a trade with the Reds. Seattle agreed to take right-handed starter Brett Tomko, outfielder Mike Cameron, and 2 minor leaguers, right-hander Jake Meyer and infielder Antonio Perez. End quote. What a whirlwind. The Reds finished 85-77 that first junior year in 2000. It's the highest they'd ever finished with Junior, and the most wins with Junior. They wouldn't finish above 500 again until 2010, 2 seasons after Junior was traded to the Chicago White Sox at the trade deadline. Now, like we tend to do, we analyze everything. We measure the success in championships. But those just weren't there. Sports, especially baseball, don't rely on the power of one singular player. That's why they're called baseball clubs. Individuals coming together, performing at a level that is better than their counterparts in the other dugout or sideline or what have you. Baseball isn't boxing, where the boxer is alone in the ring and he and only he controls his championship destiny. In order to be a championship team, you need to have a championship team. In that 2000 season, Junior hit 40 home runs, drove in 118, playing in 145 games. It was the most home runs he would hit as a Red, the most runs he would drive in as a Red, and the most games he would ever play as a Red. That season was incredible, and the future looked bright. Until it wasn't. The ultimate goal, of course, is to win the whole thing every year, but that's just not likely nor probable. But how many kids in Cincinnati got to see Junior play? How many became fans because Junior played here? And how about the Cincinnati economy? It's really unquantifiable. On paper, it just didn't work out. But in the stands, especially for kids, they got to see an all-century hometown player, one of the game's greatest, a future Hall of Famer, at Great American Ballpark. So I asked earlier this winter, where were you when Junior came home? And I got a lot of emails. Here's a few of them. Joe G. writes, I was 12 and just got home from the batting cage with my dad. We turned on the press conference and high-fived and yelled. My mom thought we were possessed. We went back to the cage the next day, and I unsuccessfully tried to hit left-handed with that sweet swing like Junior. I even wore my hat backwards all year that year. What an incredible season that was. Samantha writes, I was and still am a huge baseball fan, especially the Reds. But when Junior came home, I couldn't wait to get to Synergy. My friends and I worked at an insurance company. We watched the press conference together, and we got opening day tickets immediately. Of course, the weather was terrible that day, but I'll never forget that ovation Junior received. This one comes from my brother Chet. I remember it as though it was yesterday. My baseball teammates and I were in our dorm room playing home run derby on the original PlayStation when it came across the bottom line that the Reds had landed Junior. Now keep in mind at the time, he was not only the best player in the game, but one of the very few players you didn't leave your seat for, even if he was in the field, not just the plate. So the rumors were floating around that Junior wanted to be closer to home, but we all assumed he'd go to the Braves, or worse, the Mets. Of course, not only did the Mets break our hearts in that one-game playoff in 1999, but they did it while several of us from the team, including Mets friends from New York, were there. It was awful. However, with the team aspect of the Reds roster, I was very optimistic about the future of the club. I remember it being a few days before the Thursday press conference when news started to trickle out that the Reds were making a serious push. There were rumors of players the Reds were balking at. I remember thinking, get the deal done before he changes his mind. When they finally broke in to say he was going to the Reds, I was blown away. Not only was the best player in baseball coming home, but the coolest player in a generation now played in Cincinnati? Well, it didn't work out the way we all wanted. He brought a lot of hope to the banks of the Ohio. Ron Sexton writes, I was 16. My dad and mom and brothers all crowded around the TV set. He was home. My dad kept shushing us because we were so excited we couldn't hear the press conference. We didn't get to opening day, but we did watch on TV. No school that day. Seeing him in a Reds uniform was incredible. I missed those days. The wins weren't there, but every time Junior was up, you stopped, watched, or listened. Mike Walker. My earliest memories of Reds baseball are watching Junior on television. I didn't even know he played for the Mariners. My grandma took me to my first ever Reds game in June of 2000, and it was so loud. I was only 5, but I cherish those memories. Years later, my dad told me how crazy this city was when Junior had that press conference. It was such a magical time. Luke Grosjean. So definitely remember skipping classes to watch the presser, and just the excitement as a baseball fan. It felt like the missing piece after the 1999 season. So just the electricity that the kid was coming to play in our backyard. It was like having Babe Ruth come play for your team. Finally, or dare I even say, a new machine. That was what it felt like. But the best story was that what happened at my dinner table that day with my mom, who sadly is no longer with us. But we were all talking about how awesome it was. And Cam, my mom with a straight face goes, so does he still have to make the team? Naturally, my response, as sarcastic as all get out, yeah, Mom, he sure does. And I'm like, Mom, they just paid the greatest player of his time, and yeah, he still has to make the team. Come on, Mom. God bless her. It was an incredible time. It was just an amazing sequence of events that brought Ken Griffey Jr. to Cincinnati. It's hard to believe it's been 25 years since Junior came home. I'm Ken Miller. Thanks for listening.
High in the air, left center field. Edmonds back. Warning track. It is off the wall. Griffey round second. He's going to third. Robinson picks it up. They're going to send him. Here comes the throw. How about this? It's over. Inside the park. Homer